Lesson 7, Chapter 12, Automate and Enable Low-Risk Releases by Group 4, Zach Allen, Sheldon Foster, and Ron Silva. So in this presentation, we'll cover automating our deployment processes, which includes enabling automated self-service deployments and integrating code deployments into the deployment pipeline. We will decouple deployments from releases. Would cover environment-based release patterns, the blue-green deployment pattern dealing with database changes, the canary and cluster immune system release patterns. Then we'll move to application-based patterns to enable safer releases, which will include implementing feature toggles and performing dark launches. And lastly, we will cover surveying of continuous delivery and continuous deployment in practice. So automating our deployment process. The very first thing you want to do is document the process. And then once it's fully documented, then you'll automate it. And the requirements for automating the pipeline include deploying the same way to every environment. You need to smoke test developments, and you want to maintain consistent environments. Then we'll integrate code deployment into the deployment pipeline. Automation packages have to provide the following. They must be ready for deployment. They need to provide a push button method to deploy the code so that they're quick and easy to deploy. They need to record which commands have been run, where they were run, and who ran them. This just lets us know if anything's gone wrong, where it went wrong, and who was doing it when it went wrong. So it's easier to fix. Then we want to run a smoke test to ensure things are operating correctly, which will enable it to provide fast feedback to the deployer. Enabling automated self-service deployments. We want to build the pipeline, which will contain packages from version control. And it's important that they can be deployed to any environment. This is to keep the pipeline flexible. And it must be deployable even to production if necessary. So we want the packages to be ready to go, basically, once they're in the pipeline. Enable automated self-service deployments. Now talking about testing the deployment pipeline. We want anyone to be able to run any test. The test should work on company systems, but they should also work on personal workstations as well. Once again, just to keep the pipeline flexible. It's so important to have your pipeline accessible by anyone who has access to it and anywhere, so they can always be working on it. And lastly, we're going to talk about deploying the deployment pipeline. Anyone should be able to deploy packages, and the packages should be capable of deploying to any environment. Once again, be that the company environment or to a personalized environment. The packages should be executed by running scripts. This, once again, makes things flexible. It's very important. And the scripts should also be checked into version control, which will keep them from developing errors and make errors easier to catch and fix immediately. And once again, most importantly, it keeps the pipeline flexible. That's the number one thing here with the deployment pipeline, is you want it to be flexible.
Decouple deployment from releases. The deployment is the process in which the team installs a new software version of its service in the production infrastructure. It means that the software is running somewhere in the production infrastructure. Release is the process of moving the production traffic to the new version, making the customer get the software to use it. When we make the deploy in the production area, we ensure that any failure of the code can be corrected, and at the time of uh, releases, the customer can have the features with the less possible numbers of errors. For this reason, it's important to decouple the deploy from the release, so we avoid to have a bad moment to the team and to the customer, in addition to time spent making the quick fixes to the code. We save money and we save time. Let's talk about the two release categories. The environmental based release pattern. This refers to the two environment where the deploy is made, but only one receive the leave customer traffic. We will see some examples later, such like the blue and green deployment or the canary release. The other one is the application-based release pattern. This is where by small changes we can modify the application and a specific release can be made. Environmental-based release patterns. This pattern allows us to deploy in several environments that will allow us to make changes and fix without the need to wait for the weekend or for work at night. We have the blue and green deploy pattern, and here we have two environments that are used, and one is serving as a lead customer traffic, while in the second we can do our test without the need to uh, interrupt the user. At the moment that we are good, we are satisfied with our code, we can make the change. The blue start to be the lead with the customer, and the green will be the new where the new test will be made. Having several environmental means deal with the database. To solve any problem, we have two alternatives. One is to create two databases to work in the same way as a blue and green deployment. When this test in blue side, the database from the blue side worked, and in the same way with the green side. So we're gonna have a one database here when this is using, and the same we're gonna have one database and on this one too. Another alternative is decouple database changes from application changes. That means that the release of database change from the release to the changes in the application. Another release pattern is the canary and cluster immune system release pattern. This is the one that you use automation to make it releases, and this contribute to have a great security in the software and better monitoring of the software. If there is any mistake, any error, the software go back to be fixed. And if everything is okay, is good, you can continue to the next deploy. We have an example, the Facebook, that we can see in the diagrams here, how they use the three groups. Group 1 are the servers that only use the employees. Group 2, here are the production service where only some client can access, and the software can be deployed only if meet the requirements. And finally, group 3 are the rest of the production servers, and here the software is deployed after past the group 8. All these groups are linked in order to find all the errors along the way until the software is fully prepared to be released.
We just saw how we can deploy and switch between multiple environments to provide a safe way to introduce new features to production. We can also implement features to our customers on a per feature basis. To do this, we introduce code that will allow us to turn features on or off. These are called feature toggles. We can choose which users or groups of users will be allowed to use a new feature. We can use as many conditions as we want to determine who belongs to each group. These settings are typically stored in configuration files, but can also be accessed through directory or web services. Because the features can be turned on and off very easily, this facilitates easy rollbacks if any issues are encountered. We can simply turn the feature off. We can also use these toggles to gracefully degrade performance. For example, if there are features that are CPU intensive, we can choose to turn those features off for certain sets of users so that our application overall can run more efficiently. Another good use for feature toggles is when we must rely on a service or function that is not yet complete. We can still deploy the code to production, but we keep the feature turned off until it has been completed and is ready for release. This brings us to a technique called dark launching. This is where we deploy all new functionality to production, but we keep it all turned off, making it invisible to the consumer. We then take advantage of the code in production by implementing hidden testing and analysis on those functions. We can effectively test the new functionality under production load conditions without causing any issues to the user base. When we have determined that the new features are running as expected, we can then toggle those features on for everyone else. We can even do so in a progressive fashion, thereby allowing us to even further ensure that the features are safe to run. The terms continuous delivery and continuous deployment have come to mean different things to different people. Every organization has different needs and therefore should uniquely define what these terms are for themselves. However, the key outcome should always be low-risk, push-button events performed on demand. Jez Humble further expounded on this to define them in more detail. He said that an organization has achieved continuous delivery when small batches are continually integrated into trunk, and that trunk is always in a releasable state. These integrations, or releases to trunk, are done in a push-button, on-demand manner. This enables fast feedback, which facilitates immediate error fixing. Continuous deployment, on the other hand, is where there are regular production builds at least once daily. These builds have been thoroughly tested and are stable. They are also push-button self-service actions that can be performed by developers and operations alike. In this presentation, we have learned that deployments and releases don't have to be high-risk endeavors that cause downtime or chaos. We learned that there are several steps we can take to achieve a state of continuous delivery and deployment. We start by documenting our work, then automating or eliminating as many of our manual steps as possible. These automated steps should be self-serviceable deployments into our deployment pipeline. Next, we learned that we can decouple our deployments from our releases through environment and application-based patterns that allow us to switch environments or switch features on and off, thereby ensuring safer releases. Finally, we learned that there are key attributes that differentiate continuous delivery and deployment, and that knowing these key attributes gives our organization a model of best practices for enabling low-risk releases. This has been our presentation on Chapter 12. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.